Welcome to episode 2 of the Microflush toilet maker training. This episode will teach us how to get the slope right for the digester floor. We are removing the frames that were used to pour the foundation of the floor, and having two pieces, it makes it much easier to pull those frames out of the digester bottom. And now we add cement to the gap where the frames were located, so that now we have one complete digester floor. And this is the step where a lot of the makers do not use rebar and just have cement, because it's not really carrying a lot of weight. It's just holding the fluid as it flows out of the digester floor into the soak pit. So in wet situations where there's a lot of moisture in the soil, that's the place where the Microflush toilet makers will usually add rebar to the digester floor. It is easier to pour the floor flat. Once the floor surface is cured, it is easier to get a good slope after the first layer of blocks are laid. And that is the effort right now, is just making sure that the edge of the cement is good, and then it's time to lay that first layer of block. The digester walls must be 3 feet by 6 feet, or 91.4 centimeters by 182.9 centimeters. The concrete blocks must be dried and cured. The first step is to measure the length and the width of the digester walls so the blocks are laid exactly at the right dimensions. And this is where setting out the corner blocks on each end is important, and then measuring those corner blocks to make sure that the corners are the right width. And once you have the corners the right width, then we can move on to making sure that the length and the width are correct and that it's square. And then string will be run between those blocks. So it's important to get the blocks so they're not dusty coming into the digester floor, and lining up those blocks so that we're beginning to get the corners to be square. And when the corners are square, then we know that we're getting good shape. So each block is being laid into place. Now we are measuring the length of the digester and putting the string around each corner so that we have straight walls from corner to corner. And this is a key step in making sure that we have the walls straight, and that when we're laying the individual blocks, that those blocks are in a line. So this is a technique that every mason uses to start the walls, and it's no different here. When we are building this first level of block, we need to make sure that we are square and that the dimensions are 3 feet by 6 feet, or 91.4 centimeters by 182.9 centimeters for this digester wall dimension. And that dimension will cover the user interface slab and the access panel slab that will go on top of this at ground level. But this is the foundation, and we'll make sure that we have that set for when we want to do this work. And it's always better to measure it once or twice or 3 times. The blocks have been set. A couple of blocks have been broken into half, and then the mason is working around the pipe that is going into the soak hole. So the pipe goes between 2 blocks, and it just reaches into the soak hole, the center of the soak hole, and then to the edge of the digester blocks. So that is the key piece now, is making sure that we have all the blocks in place and that they're square, they're lined up with the string that has been put around the corner blocks, and make sure that we're ready to start using mortar. So it's a little bit of effort right now, but let's measure, making sure that we've got the distance right and everything is set. While this is happening, the user interface slab and the access panel slab can be formed while the mason is doing this work. Pipe cut the right length to go from the digester floor into the middle of the soak pit, and then that pipe will be cut and put into place, and then the first layer of block is being put into the digester floor, and you have to cut some of the blocks in half to make the sections work. And if you notice on the right hand side, under that layer of block is the pipe that goes from the digester floor into the soak pit. And it is a little misleading. It's closer toward the center in this situation. So once that layer of block is laid, then the effort starts to go that we are beginning to make sure that the slope is right. But we're getting that layer of block in nice and firm and letting that set while we're working on the slope. We're getting the joints full of mortar and getting that first course. So that first course of block will be important to get your walls of your digester ready. So the mason is doing a good job here. We've learned that whether you're a carpenter or plumber or mason, you can become a good microflush toilet maker, because the skills you don't have, you can learn, and that's part of our effort, is to make that really good so that we can have a strong digester. The flat board is useful for moving around on the cement without damaging the cement with your feet. If there's a little bit of moisture still in that digester floor. Getting the slope or gradient, first you just add cement to get a rough look of the slope. Get the gradient so it's moving from the left side of the digester to the right where the pipe is located, and then from the ends away from the pipe toward the pipe. So you're going to build a slope, in this case, from the left side to the right side, and then from the foreground toward the pipe where the mason is currently standing. And everything will flow toward that pipe. So in this case, we're using our best judgment to get the slope in a rough shape. And then once that is done, it'll just be adding a little more cement and mortar to the mix to get that slope moving toward that pipe. And that pipe has a cut on it to make it easier for the moisture to flow into that pipe. The mason is slowly just working the mortar to make that slope work just right. And it's a lot of work. And then the mason will take the level and check the slope and see if it's sloping well enough towards our pipe that will drain the water to the soak hole. And then if you need to make modifications, it's easier to throw the cement powder onto the wet cement in the areas where you need to raise up the slope. And then once the powder is put in the places where it's needed, then the water will come in and wet down that powder and this is the fine adjustments that need to be made on the slope to get that slope exactly the way we need it. The small level will be used to test the slope in every direction from the pipe. So everything that will flow toward that pipe, whether it's on the left side the water is flowing to the right, the front is flowing toward the pipe, the back is flowing toward that pipe. And whether you have the pipe on the end or on the side, in the middle, it doesn't matter, as long as you're testing the slope with the level and making sure that everything is flowing toward that pipe. And now it's just a matter of working that little bit of cement powder into the moisture below it. He will keep working it, and this is just the fine adjustments to making sure that we know that the water will flow. Where the powder doesn't soak in with the moisture below it, we add a little bit of moisture now and then work that in. At this point, we are to the place where the slope is right, and we can let this bottom layer dry. So this is the end of episode 2. We have learned how to make a good slope on our digester floor, lay the first layer of cement blocks, and make sure that the slope is right. We are ready to move on to the digester walls. So thank you for watching episode 2.